Yee! Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Tiffany here, and I am the owner of Tiffany Gordon Cosplay LLC, which is a company that focuses on costume and prop fabrication as well as education. So welcome. Love to have you as part of our cosplay community, so subscribe to the channel as well as don't forget to like the video. On today's cosplay tutorial, I'm going to be going over how to make your very own demonic Diablo head. And this is completely made out of EVA foam and foam clay. So it's really nice, lightweight. And if you want, you can wear it as a head too. Yeah. So, let's get started. And here are all the materials that you will need for making your own Diablo head, including 4 and 10mm HD foam. And I'll have links to all of these in the description, as well as my 2D pattern for the head, which is available on my website, TiffanyGordonCosplay.com. Again, the link is in the description. To first start off, you're going to want to trace all of these parts from the pattern onto 4mm EVA foam and label them. You will also want to mirror all of these pieces, so that way you can have it for the second half of the head. Then grab your heat gun and heat treat your foam, followed by using an X-Acto knife or a box cutter to cut out each of the pieces. And we're going to start by talking about the face, and here are all of the parts that she should have once it is cut out. Then grab your contact cement glue and apply it to all of your edges. Wait for the glue to fully dry and then start to connect the pieces together. I started first with the eyebrow piece, connecting it to itself, followed by the eye socket and connecting it to the cheekbone, then that piece to the eyebrow. Then I connected the main body to the upper teeth part, G and H, and proceeded to connect that piece to the eyebrow and cheekbone. Then the cheekbone to the jaw, and then finishing out with the last part of the cheekbone. Now this one can give you a little bit of trouble, and if you're having issues with the tip point aligning, you can always trim it a little bit with some scissors at the edge at a 45, and this will help it align a little bit better, but just go slow and it should turn out great. And that should complete one half of the face. Now do it for the second half. Next, we're going to apply the contact cement glue to our center seam on both sides. Wait for your glue to fully dry, and then attach the two parts of the face to create one. And a helpful tip for this is to attach both of the front teeth area and the very back part first, doing 2 little tacks, and then slowly work your way on both sides back and forth to connect in the center. You can also use the table to help connect the pieces flush instead of doing this in the air. And here's what the head should look like so far. Now for the small little horns. For this, there are 2 different sizes. One is extra small and the other one's small. And for these, you'll want to label each of them. And I recommend putting them in separate piles so you don't confuse them. And for me, I did not want to sand any pieces. So to help connect these, I ended up getting some scissors, and at the very tip on the back side, I trimmed it. And this will help you to get your point a lot cleaner when you attach all these pieces together. Then apply all of your contact cement glue to the edges, wait for it to dry, and then slowly start to assemble them together. Now once they're assembled, the bottom is going to be a little bit at a weird angle, so go ahead and just use your scissors and cut them so it's all flush and it will sit flat on your table. This will help for connecting it to the actual head. Then apply your glue to the bottom side of each of the horns as well as to the top part of your Diablo head. Wait for the glue to dry and then start to connect them. For placement of these, the larger horn should be in the center with the curve facing slightly inward, and then the smaller ones should be on the outer part, again facing with the curve going inward. Now for the larger horns. And you're gonna do the same thing where you're gonna apply your contact cement glue to all of your edges. Wait for your glue to fully dry and then start to assemble them. And for assembling them, they can be a little tricky because they're such large pieces, but start at the bottom, the largest side, on one edge and slowly just work your way using the table around. the piece will naturally start to bend in different directions, and just go with it and follow it. Just work your way slowly from the base towards the top and try not to pull the foam back and forth. A helpful tip is to make sure all of the writing is facing on the outside. So when it starts to bend, just push it back into place so that way all of the writing is pushed out and not in. And for connecting all the pieces, I ended up doing 2 halves of it first. And then once the 2 halves were connected, I then connected the back seam followed by the center seam, which is going to have the most bend and be the most difficult piece to connect. And if there's a little bit of the seams coming apart or gaps, it's totally fine because we're going to be covering this thing in foam clay and you're not going to see any of the seams afterwards anyway. And here's what the 2 horns should look like when they are finished. Now add your glue to the edge of the horn as well as to the outer part of the hole for the horns on the face. Let your glue dry and then attach them together. And here's what it should look like. The only part left is to add our teeth. And for this, I traced all of my teeth pieces onto 10mm foam. Again, you will want to heat treat the foam before cutting it out, and you should have in total 8 pieces of teeth. Now, for me, because I'm going to be using foam clay, I wanted the teeth to kind of get smaller where it would look like it was attaching to your gums. So I ended up whittling the edges of the teeth just so this would help with adding foam clay, but it's not a necessary step. And all that's left to do now is apply your glue to where the teeth will attach on the head, as well as to the top part of each of the teeth. Let it fully dry, and then start becoming a dentist and attach all your teeth to your head to complete your Diablo head. Yay! Now that your Diablo head's base is made, it's time to start adding details! And for this, I'm gonna be using foam clay. Now, if you have not used foam clay before, foam clay is a mixture of your foam and a watery down kind of version of the foam that is squishy and moldable, and it's really fun to use. And you'll first want to wet the surface that you're going to be applying the foam clay to. This helps give it a surface to stick to better. If there is no water on the surface, the foam clay will just peel off afterwards. Then cover that part with the foam clay to give it a base, an all-over covering of it. Reminder that with foam clay, you want to work in more smaller sections as a time, and you want to be adding water as you go. The foam clay, once it dries out, you will not be able to manipulate it to what you want. So you will always want to keep adding water, keep having the foam clay where it is a little bit shiny on the surface and moist. And for doing horns, I like to do small little coils or snakes and do them in strips around the horns. I did them in like 3 or 4 different layers, just applying it first there. Then you can use your fingers and kind of smooth it into the already foam clay that's on the surface, and this will kind of give it a natural horn-like look to your piece. You can also use clay working tools to help. I like to use the pointed one as well as the flat-edged one to kind of help, and you can use these to give more lines and more textures and do a bunch of creative stuff. And some other tips for working with foam clay is foam clay you may have to come back to on a few different days, as foam clay when it dries overnight will actually shrink. So whatever depth that you had made the day before, just be aware it is going to shrink on itself, which is why I like to use foam as a base and add that height with normal foam rather than the foam clay, so it doesn't shrink as much. And this can also be said about your details. So if the clay is too wet, you won't be able to add crisp lines, as it'll start to shrink when it dries, and those lines will kind of wash away. So I recommend when you're doing fine detail parts, have the foam clay dry out a little bit and then come back and add your deep lines. You can even come back when the piece is fully dry with an X-Acto knife and kind of carve into it. Just be aware if you go too far down, you may then get into your normal foam and you may start to cut it. And as I said before, I like to use foam as a base to add height. And for the horns specifically, I wanted to have more of a pop out look to the larger horns. And for this, I just kind of made these weird shapes out of 4mm foam, and then I attached it to the horns where they were actually coming off of the surface. This made it a lot easier for me to put my foam clay around it and kind of give it more of an illusion that the horns were coming out. And then once I was done, I waited a full 24 hours for the foam clay to fully dry, and then the head was done. Now for painting! And here are all of the tools and materials that I used for painting the Diablo head. A reminder, you do not have to use an airbrush gun or airbrush paint. You can do this with normal acrylic paint as well. I just used what I have around the house. And I'll have links to all of these in the description as well. Now a reminder, you do need to wait 24 hours for your foam clay to fully dry. Then you can start with your painting. But for painting, you always want to prime your piece first. And I highly recommend doing this with Plastidip. This is a rubber spray paint, and I ended up covering it in 3 heavy coats onto the outer side and as much as the inside as I could do. Reminder, you need to wait an hour between each coat to let it fully dry. And this is going to help hold all of your foam and your foam clay together and help it not to chip off. Then after 24 hours of waiting for your Plastidip to fully dry, it is time to start painting. And the paint that I'm going to be using is provided by Kratex Colors, and it is all airbrush paint. That is the Wicked Colors line. If you don't have access to an airbrush gun or airbrush paint, you can always use what I recommend is the Liquitex heavy body acrylic paints. Those are what I used to use before switching to airbrush painting. And I started off with a base coat of a mixture of jet black and gray, applying it to the entire surface so that way there would be some airbrush paint on the surface. Reminder that airbrush paint is best in working in layers. And I kind of planned on for the paint job to be more realistic and dark and creepy, and it kind of went haywire and the whole paint job got, in my opinion, really muddy. So I kind of started going towards more of a cartoony version of the head, which I think when I'm in the full Lilith costume, it makes it where the head stands out a lot more. So my paint job kind of changed midway, just so you're aware. But I did end up going with the next color of more of a Wicked Brown for the horn parts. And for the main face, the base color was Pyrrole Red. And then for adding the shading, and for me, I like to do this technique where you apply black on top of your surface that's already painted, and while the paint is still wet, working in small sections, you wipe it away with a paper towel. Now this is going to give you a natural shading in all of your areas. And depending on how textured you made your surface will depend on how much darker your colors are going to appear. Now I'll say with mine, the surface of the Diablo head was extremely textured, so it ended up making all of my parts extra dark. But in a bit, I'll show you how I made this lighter. The surface of your piece looking a little bit more realistic, I like to go back with a dry paintbrush, dipping the dry paintbrush in some paint very lightly and then kind of scratching the surface. This is going to put a little bit of that paint and highlight higher areas and give it more of an organic look. And I did this onto the horns using a little bit of a white towards the tip, as well as using some of the crimson red for the face, doing the same process. And the statues of Lilith holding the Diablo head had it where the red kind of blended on the horns from the face outward. So I did a little bit on the tips of the horns as well with the red. For the teeth, I kind of had a more difficult time because they either were really bright white cartoony or they just looked weird. But I kind of went back and forth between painting the base white, and then once the white color was dry, dry, I would do my coat of jet black onto the surface and then wipe it away while it was still wet, and then went back after that was dry with a dry paintbrush and some cream towards the tips of the teeth. And this kind of helped pop it more and not feel as cartoony, but I'll still say they're a little weird to me still. And the absolute final step to complete your Diablo head is to seal all of your paint. And for this, I'm going to be using Createx Colors UVLS Satin Clear. And this is a clear coat that you'll apply to the entire surface of all of your painted areas. It's going to hold your paint so it won't fade over years, and the sun won't harm your paint colors, as well as it'll give an even look throughout the piece to complete your Diablo head. Congratulations! And that, guys, is how I made my Diablo head from Diablo. And I hope you found this video helpful for making your very own one for wearing or having as a prop, or maybe for your Lilith cosplay like I did. And if you found this video helpful, I'd love to hear from you in the comments, so let me know, as well as don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. A big thank you to all of my company sponsors here on YouTube, as well as all of my members here on YouTube, specifically those legendary members who financially help to support me so I can continue bringing you more cosplay videos, and I can continue doing this as my full-time job. And I really appreciate it. So much love, guys, and I'll see you for our next video. Bye!